Hi, JP Collins from Book of Hours, and today I'm out of the van, back in the studio, and wanted to talk to you today about some things that are sort of green related, infrastructure related, some of the things that we've been talking about. Julie and I, we talk about the Green New Deal and some of the issues with that, some of the issues surrounding this climate change initiatives that are climate change initiatives that are going on, supported by billionaires, fronted by Greta. But this is skirting that. It's talking about more about infrastructure in America. A lot of it has been falling apart. This is a case of an authority, a municipal authority, or I guess a countywide authority, dragging its feet to make improvements, and basically it's in my so I'm here in Pittsburgh for about a little over a year now, and I knew there was a sewer plant just about a mile and a half from where we live, water cleaning plant or whatever you call that. And I knew that was the case. I thought it was a corporation that ran it. Turns out that it's a county-wide, or it covers a lot of different municipalities. So it's not it's a government sort of organization, but it's not run by the city of Pittsburgh. It's not run by the county of Allegheny. It was put together in the 1940s after a long time of Pittsburgh not having a real sewer infrastructure. Give you a little background. So the organization is called Alcosan, and it stands for Allegheny County Sanitation, basically is what it stands for. It was started about 60 years ago, a little over 60 years ago. And back in the turn of the last century, Pittsburgh was basically dumping sewage right into the rivers. We have three rivers here. We have the Ohio, the Allegheny, and the Monongahela. And it's a very industrial city, or it was. So a lot of industrial waste, sewage, raw sewage was going into the river. And even up until about World War II, the city of Pittsburgh's attitude towards sewage going into the river was, we shouldn't have to clean up after ourselves. We're just going to dump it in the river, and those who want to use the water further down the river to drink from are going to have to clean it up themselves to drink from it. So great attitude, and the United States government had been after them even before the EPA had been formed, to get them to clean this up, and because or even the state of Pennsylvania was going after the city of Pittsburgh to clean up their act. It wasn't until around 1944, like I said, that that Alcosan had been formed, and over a period of time, some things had been done since the late 1800s to 1944 to clean up the sewage going out. They started filtering water, for instance, because typhoid in Pittsburgh was very high, and the average immigrant that came to Pittsburgh contracted typhoid within the first year to 2 years of living here. And I think there were, I forget what the percentage of deaths were from typhoid. So it was not a pleasant place to live in the turn of the century and into the Depression and into World War II. Fast forward into the 80s and 90s when the steel mills started going away. A lot of jobs have been lost, but as a result of that, the area is actually cleaned up environmentally. There was a move to plant a lot of trees. I forget how long ago that was, but there's trees everywhere now in Pittsburgh, on the hillsides of Pittsburgh, where there weren't any prior to that. Partly because of pollution, partly because people didn't put any value in that. And after things started getting, I think it was about the 1970s that they started planting a lot of trees. And the hillsides here, there's lots of them, are covered with trees. And it's a very tree-lined area. Something else is, so the air is cleaner here. There's no soot like there used to be. I was told that the city of Pittsburgh used to smell like oil everywhere because they use oil in a lot of steel presses. So if they were making sheet metal and things like that, and then the machinery that's making steel. So all the mills that cast steel. Most of them are gone now, so you don't have the same amount of industrial activity and pollution that you had before. That said, it's still kind of a dirty place. Pittsburghers litter like crazy, and so that's nothing compared to the air pollution that existed before. But the water is still problematic because of sewage runoff. When it rains, when there's storms or snow melt. And that's because of the history of the Pittsburgh sewage system. It was sort of an ad hoc system that was then kind of, what's the word I'm thinking of, bolted on to a more modern system that Alcosan created. So we have a really weird, like a lot of cities, I guess, you have aging infrastructure with newer infrastructure, and you have a combination of industrial waste and runoff stormwater combining into storm drains or the sewer system itself. And you're getting a lot of nasty runoff into the rivers. And so there's a lot of times when you cannot make contact with the water in the rivers, or else you'll get ill. So it's still a problem. And Alcosan has been working. I've been reading a lot about this probably since the early 2000s with the EPA and the state of Pennsylvania, as well as the county of Allegheny, to clean up this system as well as the situation, to stop getting the runoff, preventing floods, and making basically a more environmentally better a better environment for everybody, healthier, cleaner, and better for the rivers as well. Now I want to stop here for a moment and mention that why would you be interested in sewer infrastructure for Pittsburgh and Allegheny County? And the reason that I'm doing this is to basically let you know that there's a lot of places in the United States where the municipalities or the governmental governmental agencies, I should say, have really fallen down on their infrastructure. Okay, a good example is Flint, Michigan. They're the best known in where the water was deliberately polluted for the citizenry that lives there. But there's other parts of the country, and there's other places where not only is infrastructure crumbling, but people are forced to live in areas that have, say, oil refineries, or there's fracking going on, or other sort of industrial, maybe even agriculture going on that pollutes water systems, that causes, like earthquakes, and like in Oklahoma with fracking, and all dozens of other things that are going on. And it's kind of interesting that we're seeing a situation here where an entity is like Alcosan is actually doing their job, and that the infrastructure is intact, even though it's old and they need to replace a lot of things. They're actually doing their job, whereas in a lot of places this isn't happening. So this is something that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to bring it to your attention because infrastructure in the United States has been placed on the backs of the citizenry, just like everything else. Jobs get taken away, economies start crumbling like they have here in Pittsburgh, and the government and corporations are responsible for those things. But at the same time, the taxes keep getting cut for the rich and increased for poor and middle class people. And the responsibility then is put on their backs for financing these kinds of things, and we're finding that in other aspects of what's going on in the world, like we were talking about, like the Green New Deal, and I'll get into that at the end of this. So what I wanted to do, and it sounds boring, but it's actually kind of interesting, is read to you this brochure that I got in the mail. Now, this is stuff that's basically on their website as well, but I started reading it to Julie yesterday and kind of putting in my own 2 cents worth. So I'm going to read at least some of it to you and give you some input, maybe repeat what I was talking about before. But let's see here. So this is called Alcosan's Modified Consent Decree and Clean Water Plan. Okay. Now, the Modified Consent Decree. Now, the Consent Decree is basically a legal document between the EPA and Alcosan, as well as I think the city, the county of Allegheny. There might be another entity involved. And it's basically a legal document saying, you, Alcosan, are going to do these things to improve the water quality, entering the water stream, the rivers from the waste stream. And there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of foot dragging, a lot of screaming, and there was also a lot of complaints from Alcosan that this was going to cost too much and it was going to cost the consumer at the end, paying the bills, too much per year to pay for the infrastructure upgrades. Now, there's been a history of this kind of thing in Pittsburgh since the last century, the century before the last century, so the turn of the last century, where they were saying, people in Pittsburgh were saying, we can't have a clean sewage system because it would cost too much to implement. It's not worth it. And they weren't looking at the health benefits that would result from that, but that's the 19th century. So anyway, so this document has been punted back and forth between the EPA and Alcosan, and I think that there's been a lot of foot dragging on the part of Alcosan. But let me read this and kind of interject as we go along. Since 2013, Alcosan has been negotiating. Okay, so there's a key word right there. Has been negotiating with the regulatory agencies, the United States Department of Justice, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, the Allegheny County Health Department, to modify our earlier agreement to reduce sewer overflows into our rivers and streams. Now, 2008 is when this thing kind of came about. And the EPA, again, like I said that they needed to clean it up. The estimated costs were coming in at they were all over the place. I think Alcosan said, well, it'll be $1 billion. And then the county of Allegheny and the city of Pittsburgh said, no, it's going to be like $20 billion. And basically it's come around to being about $3.5 billion that they were, saying that it was going to cost. So this renegotiation has brought it down to $2 billion. Okay, so I don't know what the difference is once you get past $1 billion, but for them 3.6 was too much, or 3.5 or whatever it was. $2 billion is more of a workable number. Now, when I say negotiating, and I was telling Julie this, I was like, well, this could mean, this is before I started doing my research, this could mean they either negotiated it so that it would be a better system, or they negotiated it so it would be a worse system, so that's corporate speak. You're not really sure what's going on there. But given the research that I've done, sounds like they found a better solution than what they were actually proposing for a lot less money. Alcosan first entered into the consent decree in 2008, so as I mentioned, and completed the required plan in 2012. Although comprehensive, the public challenged the authority to make the plan more affordable for ratepayers, yet flexible enough to take advantage of the advances in the field of green stormwater and wastewater management. In order to meet the question, further negotiations were required or were necessary. Now, here they say the public challenged the authority, which the authority is Alcosan, and they're saying the public. Now, by the public they mean the governmental agencies, not people like you and me. There probably were some people that were activists or that were organizations that were public organizations, nonprofits that were complaining to them, but primarily what they mean is the EPA. And they are saying here they wanted something more affordable. Now, they've always been saying this. This has always been their go-to. We can't afford to do this. Okay, so it's a way for organizations like entities like Alcosan to get away with not doing something. Corporations do this all the time as well. They drag their feet and they say, well, we can't afford it. It can't, so it can't be done. But because there were watchdog organizations, governmental organizations, I'm kind of like slurring my words here, watchdog organizations and governmental organizations to keep them on task, it made them do this. They also say here they wanted something that was more flexible. Now, this is kind of, again, corporate speak. They're making themselves out to be the good guys in that they were trying to seek out a way to, make this more flexible. Well, the EPA was always pushing for greener solutions right from the beginning. Well, I'll get into those in a minute. Then they go on to say, there is no easy fix. Our problem is serious and large. Billions of gallons of diluted, untreated wastewater overflow into our rivers and streams annually, and they're not kidding there. The solution is comprehensive. We will be removing 7 billion gallons of combined sewer overflow every year. Now, that's what they're planning to do with this new agreement and this new initiative, and it's going to be a huge infrastructure change, so this is interesting. That work is necessary to ensure our rivers and streams remain the community asset that they are today. In order to offset the cost of the required improvements, rates will be increased. Well, that, we knew that. We knew that from the start. And they've been holding, there's been a lot, so along with this propaganda, there's been a lot of propaganda I've been seeing around the city as I drive around in my job. There's billboards up and saying something about, our rivers are our assets, and our, the clean rivers and clean water. We're fighting for clean water, and all these kinds of things. And they feature people from the community. Anyway, so there's a lot of propaganda, floating around about this. This is only one piece of it. It's on their website. They have 2 different websites. They have their own website, and then they have this thing called 3 Rivers Proud. And 3 Rivers Proud is another website where they can, put out, things about what it is they're doing. Some call it marketing, some call it propaganda. I would say it's somewhere in between. They also, they've also been saying, well, with these increased, costs, the ratepayers are going to pay more money. That's because pretty much most, if not all, of Alcosan is paid for by ratepayers, and it's like 82 different municipalities in this region. So that's basically people like me and Julie who are homeowners or renters who then pay their landlord. The landlord then pays that, and it gets paid through various means depending on where you live. Okay, but the municipalities pay Alcosan, and the ratepayers pay the municipalities. We have reached a consent decree that meets the challenges from the public, while also meeting the regulatory requirements of the Clean Water Act. Now, this is something that Alcosan has not been meeting since the Clean Water Act has been implemented in the 1970s, and so it's good that they're actually doing these kinds of things. But again, I'm going to get into this in a little bit. There's a lot of issues, but I'm going to keep going here because there's not much more here. Just a little bit, a couple more paragraphs. So the header is affordable. Keeping the cost of the Clean Water Plan as affordable as possible for the majority of our system users, is important. Because of the changes contained in this amendment consent decree, okay, so this amended consent decree, so this is the document between the EPA and these other entities. Because of the changes contained in this amended consent decree, the cost has been spread over a longer period of time. Additionally, the authority has been more proactive, and when they say authority, they mean Alcosan, has been more proactive with its own finances to keep the costs down. We know that the new rates may still be out of reach for some. The new rates, so in 2016, the Alcosan Board of Directors created the Clean Water Assistance Fund, administered by the Dollar Energy Fund, to help homeowners with their wastewater treatment bills. $1 million is set aside each year by Alcosan for this program. So this is for people who are, who are unemployed, underemployed, or they can't pay their bills. And again, it's kind of like it feels to me like an ass backwards system where the government is taking up the responsibility for helping people who are under and unemployed in a region that has lost its job its job market and tax base. There's no jobs for people, and so there's a lot of people who are really, really poor around here, and they have to have assistance with their heating bills and their electricity, and like even something like their sewer. Okay, these are ridiculous. These are things that should be paid for through other people, but because of the way the United States has been going through neoliberal policies, and then the conservatives wanting to cut taxes and cut taxes and cut taxes, the state of Pennsylvania is a commonwealth, which is really weird because the Commonwealth isn't being preserved any longer, and it hasn't been in the United States for years. And so this is something that like we hear all the time. It's like 8 people in the world control all the wealth, basically, and like at least half the wealth of the world, and the rest is spread out among the rest of 10 billion people that are in the world. So it keeps draining. The money keeps draining up. The infrastructure keeps like crumbling, and people need to turn to nonprofits like the Dollar Energy Fund to help them pay for their basic bills like electricity, their heating and gas, their water, and their sewage. And this is just ridiculous. I mean, this is why there are governments in the first place. This is why we are more or less against representational democracy, because the representatives always sell out to the corporations and the capitalist society or capitalism, and let the rest of us basically fend for ourselves. So if we have to have government, then make them do their job, right? And if we have to have capitalism, then make them pay for some of this stuff. They're making all the money. We help them make that money, and yet they don't give it back. They don't support the communities that they take the money, that they extract money out of. Okay, so this is a really fucked up system right here. The fact that people have to go to a nonprofit and have to beg for money and apply for these things in order to pay for their sewage. Okay, that's ridiculous. Okay, adaptable. The plan allows Alcosan and its customer municipalities to use the best technology, including green stormwater infrastructure. I'll get into that in a minute. We will be able to adapt our planning based on how the systems perform. Okay, this is a significant component of the Clean Water Plan. Alcosan will continue working with its customer municipalities to reduce the amount of stormwater and groundwater entering the collection system using a variety of green and gray technologies. Okay, so they just used a term there, and I was like, gray technologies? Do they mean like gray water systems, or what are they referring to? And I was doing some searching around, finally found something, and by gray technologies they mean pipes, concrete pipes. Okay, in terms of green technologies, what they're referring to are things that are a lot softer footprint on the world, and actually can improve life in a lot of different ways. One of them is they're suggesting something called bioswales. Now, a bioswale is something that is at the end of a block, a street block, and it basically takes the water that's running down the gutter, during a rainstorm or whatever, and it diverts it into this little area that is dirt and plants. So the plants and the dirt sort of take that rainwater, that storm water, and allow it to drain into the ground and groundwater and go below the surface. Whereas like hardscape, like concrete and asphalt, it runs off, right? And it goes into the storm drain. So this is diverting it into the bioswale before it goes into the storm drain. So it allows for natural means of absorbing the water into the ground before it goes into the stormwater. So it really diverts a lot of water off the hardscape and puts it into back into the ground. So that's kind of a cool thing. Another thing they're talking about are rain gardens, which again is the same kind of thing. Now, so there's other things that you can do that are like permeable paving stones and things of that nature that'll again allow the water to absorb into the ground rather than just running off. The other thing about the bioswales is the gunk and crap from the road, oil and various deposits that come from auto traffic also go and get into the ground. The ground and the plants filter that out before it gets into the underground water collection. So it does a lot of really good things. But I'm going to get into something else real quick. So I started reading more and more. Like I'll put some links on this, but basically there's an organization called Pittsburgh United, which is a environmental justice organization, and I don't agree with 100% of where they're standing because of the reasons they give for a number of things. They're opposing a lot of this plan, not 100%, but what they want people to do is to go in and comment, because there is a public comment period on this proposed action. And they're saying that there isn't enough green technology. They want to see more above ground technologies and infrastructure, and less gray technologies, meaning concrete tubes, pipes going underground. Because a part of the proposal is to put piping, pipelines, basically waste pipelines under the rivers and alongside the rivers, and diverting water from the rivers, but putting them into pipes and going under the rivers and things of that nature. Their reasoning is that concrete causes a lot of CO2 and things of that nature. But I think the other thing too is it just really disrupts our environment. It causes a lot of trouble. Puts concrete and dust in the air, and it's just kind of nasty. Whereas there can be a lot more soft. There can be softer approaches that are just as effective, if not more so, to divert the water from getting into the storm drains, but more importantly, into the many streams and tributaries that go down into the rivers. Going around different parts of Pittsburgh, I've noticed there are all these like little streams and runs all over the place. And some of the more major runs and streams do get polluted, and that's because of runoff. So one of the things that the EPA went after Alcosan for is that very thing. Stormwater and wastewater going into the streams and polluting them. So this group is, again, they're called Pittsburgh United. I'll put the link to them. And they have a program called Our Water Campaign, which is basically about what we're talking about right here. So some environmental activists are opposed to part of this plan. They're happy that at least that some green technologies have been put into place. And I think it's because of the EPA and organizations like this that forced the hand of Alcosan to move in that direction. Because honestly, I don't think they would have done it if that would not have been pushed on them. Because entities, I should say, like Alcosan, just like public utilities, like energy utilities and things like that, always think in big industrial ways. Instead of thinking in smaller, more elegant solutions, they always think of the more larger infrastructure types of solutions, like concrete pipes going under the city, carrying the sludge and the sewage out to the Alcosan plant so they can be cleaned and then dispersed, as opposed to maybe a smaller network of these types of plants that can help clean the water and then return it in a better form to the environment. But again, they're thinking big, so it's a problem that they think this way. So it requires the input of the public to make these changes. Okay, so speaking of the big areas, like the next header is regional. Alcosan will be assuming the responsibility for the largest sewers and sewer facilities in the service area. This reduces the financial burden on the municipalities and allows Alcosan to more directly manage and reduce excess flows into the system. This will be accomplished by the authority assuming ownership and maintenance of at least 200 miles of large multi-municipal trunk sewers and associated facilities by the end of 2020. The current system encompasses 90 miles. Well, there's a little bit more than I wanted to get into. I might skip over this next thing. I mean, they're talking about 250 million gallons per day will be increased to 480 million gallons per day by the end of 2025, and then ultimately 600 million gallons per day at the end of 2027. I mean, that's gallons, millions of gallons of sewage and runoff. So that's a lot of shit. So what I wanted to talk about next had more to do with what's in the next segment of this, which is the back of the brochure. But it has to do with what I just read to you, and that is that Alcosan is going to assume that they're assuming the financial burden. So they're reducing the financial burden, and they're assuming the management. Right. Okay. But let me get into what that actually means when I read the next part here. This plan includes the green revitalization of our waterways, GROW, G-R-O-W, so green revitalization of our waterways, GROW, grant program available to our customer municipalities for source reduction and green infrastructure solutions. It also includes the construction of large conveyance systems which can hold excess flow. Our GROW program, in its fourth cycle with over $22 million of grant awards for 80 projects distributed among 38 member municipalities and municipal sewer authorities. This investment has leveraged another $25 million in municipal authority and third-party funding, oh boy, for projects that are protected to remove 127 million gallons of water from the system. And then, the rest is the work we are doing in the coming years is vital to the region. So more, just corporate speak. But let me get back into this GROW program. So, what Alcosan is basically doing is they are giving grant money to various municipalities. Now they say 38. Okay. There's 82 or something like that municipalities in the entire system. So, you do the math. That's less than half of what's out there. But they're basically giving these grants out to these municipalities to do the work that Alcosan can't or doesn't want to do. And it's mostly in the form of these green technologies that I was talking about, the bioswales, the rain gardens, and the like. And it's the kind of thing that Pittsburgh United is pushing for. One of the things that they say on their website is we're looking for technologies and solutions that are above ground, not below ground. And this is kind of breaking it up to be both for green technologies, but they're also including gray technologies, pipelines, meaning it also includes the construction of large conveyance systems which will hold excess flow. So that means that they're trying to get a lot of the stormwater and the runoff out off the street and into pipes that go directly to Alcosan's plant. And so it's really, it's this kind of thing that's been going on with governments and with corporations where they're basically not taking full responsibility for what they're supposed to be doing, putting it off on some other entity or some other group or individuals, while claiming that they're actually doing the work. And that's a big problem. And it's what's going on, I think, everywhere. And we see this through, again, neoliberal political policies, corporate policies around the world, and it basically takes the onus off them to do the work that they're supposed to be doing in the first place. We're seeing similar aspects of that in the climate action that's going on, and we have been talking a lot about Cory Morningstar, and we actually did a piece based on some of her work. So we actually took some of her tweets and turned them into a funny little animated video called Greta Sales about Greta Thunberg. The problem is that what's going on is that there's some social engineering going on. People are being told that they want to have certain actions take place that will save the planet and save the environment. And these solutions and these technologies that they're proposing that will save the planet are really untested, and they're really not clean and green as you might think they are. And these are like carbon sequestration plants. These are other technologies that are proven but aren't necessarily, it's turning out that they're not as effective as everybody said that they were, and that they don't last as long. And they're actually causing more pollution to the world and causing more carbon to go into the environment. And if carbon is really the thing that you're worried about, they actually cause more carbon to get into the atmosphere than if you just continued using coal and oil. Now, that said, I don't think that coal and oil is a great thing either, because there's a lot of environmental degradation and pollution that comes from mining and that comes from oil extraction. But there's even worse pollution that's coming out of the mineral extraction that's being done for the production of windmills, solar panels, and things of that nature. And again, going back to what I was saying before, is like Alcosan, these people and these entities, these organizations think that we need to have windmill farms and that we need to have solar panel farms, and that's where we get into a lot of trouble, because you have waste, you have environmental degradation and pollution and carbon emissions going into the atmosphere as a result of the production of these things that are supposed to be preventing carbon from going into the atmosphere. Now, the initiatives that are going into paying for these things are now being extracted from the various investment funds and pension funds that are out there. Pension funds are now starting to invest in these green technologies through different programs that billionaires like Bill Gates Foundation, or Bill Gates, or Al Gore, who's richer than you think he is, that are putting these things together. They're putting the deals together. The funds are investing in these deals, and if the deals don't go down or the technology doesn't work out, these billionaires get to walk away scot-free without losing a thing. The people whose pensions that were rated to investing in these things don't get to walk away scot-free. In fact, they're broke. They don't have a pension any longer. And if the investments do go through and they do make money, guess who gets to make the profits? Well, it's not the pension fund or the people who are invested in that pension fund. It's going to be the billionaires. So this idea of, once again, turning something into somebody else's issue, turning it back into somebody else's problem, somebody else's job. They're basically, instead of like Alcosan doing the work, they're putting it on the smaller municipalities, giving them a pittance of money to take care of it. Okay, they still have to invest their own money to do it, but they're getting some grant funding to pay for some of it. Okay, but they're doing the thing that Alcosan should be doing, but aren't doing, because they don't want the bill to be higher than $2 billion. and they were saying that they were complaining that they can't go above $2 billion because it would cost the citizenry, the ratepayers, too much money. Okay, so Alcosan is really basically putting the onus on the ratepayers and the municipalities rather than really funding it themselves and finding ways to make the funding work without putting it on the ratepayers. The billionaires are finding ways to rip off citizens of the world through their pension funds to invest in untested technologies or technologies that pollute the world even worse than what we already are doing. And they're making us ask for that. And they're doing it through propaganda, through little girls out with signs out in front of school, or getting children around the world to get out of school, to take off school and cry and get really upset. They've really fucked with the kids of the world, because now they think that they don't have a future. And they don't, actually, because the billionaires are going to take that future away from them. It's not because of this climate change thing that it's not a climate change thing. There is real problem. There are real environmental problems in the world. But it's not from what they're saying it is. What's really going on is the communities are being polluted by fracking and oil production and oil refineries and agriculture, big agriculture, and wastewater, and nobody having clean water. That's what the problem is. That's why nobody has a future. We're being poisoned to death. Insects are going away. Birds are going away. And the oceans are being polluted. And they're going to be mined by these giant robots that are scary as fuck looking. And they're going to be tearing up who knows what's at the bottom of the ocean that helps us up here. So they're using untested science but at the same time saying that the science is in. The science has been, it's finalized. This is, and there has never been settled science. Science is never settled. The only thing that's been settled is that there's gravity, we have an atmosphere, and maybe some other, things in physical laws of the universe that have been settled. But science has never been settled. They're always discovering new things. People are always doing research. People are always investigating. Science is never settled. And for them to use that term over and over again tells me that this is propaganda. These are talking points, not science. And for them to come out and socially engineer the situation and get us to beg for the thing that they want, make us beg for what they want while making it look like we want it, is just insidious. Okay, well, that pretty much wraps up my talk for today. I hope you weren't too bored with it, and I hope you got a payoff. This is a bit of marketing propaganda that is partly true and partly false. And if you know how to read these things, and doing a little research, you can figure out what's actually being said. Who's opposing it? Who's promoting it? Who's supporting it? What's going on in the background? And sometimes you have to do some deep digging. I didn't dig too deeply on this one. But sometimes you have to look around a little bit and see what's going on out there. But that's what we are here at Book of Hours do. We dig and we produce things that are a little more easy to digest. And hopefully this wasn't, again, too boring. I hope it was interesting to you and not too local. Tried to bring a bigger picture into it. If you like the kind of work that we're doing, if you like having digestible content brought to you that's interesting and unusual, go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/bookofhours. And you can sign up for as little as $2 a month, and you can help us continue producing content like this. You can also go to our Book of Hours site, book-of-hours.com/support, and you can make a one-time donation through PayPal. I'm JP Collins. This is Book of Hours. Julie is in the background. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.